Do you have any idea what you've done, Salazar? The ex-captain rubbed his bruised face. The impact of the rubber bullet had left a lasting mark that would remain for a couple of days more. Worse was the powdered paint. Easy to clean off armor and clothes, but it stuck to skin like a predatory parasite, which meant he had to bear the mark of his inglorious defeat in more ways than one. He didn't rebuke his wife's justified anger. He had no right to do so after his loss. "That's clear, Tuzia," he replied, looking into his wife's fiery gray eyes, her otherwise stunning features marred by an angry scowl and pursed lips. "I brought shame upon our house's name." "Shame?" Tuzia asked softly, flabbergasted for a moment after hearing her husband's reply. "Shame! Salazar, you repeatedly humiliated House Reed. Vashakati is beyond displeased. And Vasurt? He wanted your head. It was only through Vashakati's intervention that you're still alive. He convinced his brother to let him decide your punishment himself." Salazar lowered his head in shame. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to rage and shout, but the experience had left him drained in more ways than one. "Then I shall accept my punishment with the scraps of dignity I have left, Tuzia." "You better be ready to grovel and beg for mercy, Salazar," Tuzia remarked angrily. "How could you? During the banquet to celebrate and honor His Majesty the Prince? All for what? That idiot brother of yours?" Salazar frowned slightly. "Leave Abacus out of this, Tuzia. How can I when his death was the catalyst that pushed you to seek blind vengeance?" Tuzia argued back. "You were the only one that loved that fool. Tell me why, Salazar. Why did you pursue retribution for his death when it wasn't warranted?" "You only say that because the prince himself elevated the man to a knight banneret. Otherwise, you would not argue. In fact, you would have done the same if any of your sisters, Jacine and Henrietta, had died instead of Abacus and you were in my place. Our house was shamed with his reckless death whilst under the command of a then mere commoner," Salazar countered. "That may be so, Salazar, but I'm not single-minded enough to pursue something I know goes beyond my reach," Tuzia countered, sighing heavily a few seconds after glaring at her husband. "Look, I understand your position. Abacus, for all his faults, was a Reed and a noble. Redford Kalen put a commoner promoted by the prince in charge of the squadron he was in, which ended in his death. I understand," she said, emphasizing the word, "why you needed to seek justice in order to spare House Reed from such an inglorious stain. But you went too far in your vendetta." "That much is clear," Salazar muttered, as the stinging pain across his face reminded him constantly of his folly. "My brother deserved better. Abacus was an inept imbecile who was far too ambitious for his own good, a ruthless, deluded simpleton lacking the intelligence, guile, and subterfuge to match his hunger for power," Tuzia admonished. "Your parents lacked the attention to properly guide him, and you loved him too much to correct his behavior. Heavens, Salazar, you had to shield him when he caused the death of his previous squadron leader because he was too envious of his position, believing it should belong to him by right." Salazar gritted his teeth, remembering said incident and how he only managed to protect his brother with a minor sanction of negligence due to the poor, unfortunate soul that got in his way belonged to a lesser house. "He was still my brother. And he got himself killed," Tuzia interjected. "You know this. I know this. Vashakati knows this. Worse than your blind thirst for retribution, you insulted the prince. You insulted the Reaper, Salazar. You insulted a man under her direct command and protection. That you're still alive and not flayed is in itself a miracle. I'm certain that monster would put your head on a pike and display you as a gruesome trophy if the decision was hers alone to make." Tuzia rubbed her temples for a moment, gritting her teeth in frustration. Salazar waited in silence for at least half a minute before asking, "Where are Juno and Vesizar? Our sons don't want to talk to you, Salazar. They're ashamed of you, with just reason," Tuzia replied with a glare that promised pain. "Pursuing your vendetta, that I can understand. I can even forgive it if you had obeyed Juliana Winfield's orders. At least then the shame would have been manageable. But you brought disruption to a most auspicious moment, and worst of all, you were defeated in a duel you issued by a man who mere days prior was a mere commoner. A commoner!" she shouted angrily as she shook with barely contained rage. "I cannot begin to describe the humiliation I felt when Vashakati told us what had happened. As part of a branching house, Our actions reflect directly on the rest of House Reed. Do you have any idea what you've caused, Salazar? I will have to organize at least 3 tea parties and a grand banquet just to ensure our friends and allies that our family remains strong despite your chastisement. Pinching the bridge of her nose, she continued, Your parents were wounded first when they heard of their idiot son's demise. That was overshadowed by your reckless blunder. My parents are distraught by these turn of events, but will help me quell any potential rumors that will stir up from the lesser houses. Salazar listened in silence, taking in the verbal beating his wife delivered upon him. He couldn't blame her. After the rage subsided and the reality of his situation and actions sunk in, he knew he had made a serious mistake. Separated by light years in distance and with a succession dispute raging, he had no means to go back home. Even if he could, the humiliation dealt to his house would only increase if he ran like a coward. More so than that, however, he knew Vashakati would prevent him from escaping without issuing his punishment. I'll find a way to mend the wound left by my defeat, Salazar promised. This war shall offer me many opportunities to cleanse my name from shame and restore the honor of House Reed. His wife rolled her eyes before slamming both hands onto a hard surface. Vashakati will show restraint, but will deliver unto you no mercy, Salazar. He won't exile you unless he's willing to risk tearing the wound you provoked open. She let out a tired sigh, pointing an incriminatory finger at her husband. You will take your punishment and beg your uncle to spare you, Salazar. Your reputation has been crippled, if not entirely ruined. Our position of favor with Vassort will surely be affected thanks to your idiocy. My parents are now old. Neither of them can hold the position of head of our family for long. I'm the only viable option. My punishment will be measured, Salazar replied with a confidence he did not feel. For our sake, Salazar, beg the prince that you're right. Tuzia glared one last time. The only way for you to regain your honor is to destroy that damn upstart. Salazar frowned. If you wish to deliver me from life, dearest wife, a poisoned dagger plunged into my heart or back would be far more merciful. And now you show your cowardice? She exclaimed, irritated. He's a simpleton at best, Salazar. I'm certain you'll find a way to strike him down. Anything can happen in combat. Even if I would entertain the idea, Salazar began, his frown now turning into a glare, I'll likely be sent to a support vessel or demoted a rank or two. Our paths are unlikely to cross again. If we cross again, no. He won the duel fairly. I accept the result, I accept my loss. It is the honorable thing to do. You're a weak man, Salazar, witless and driven by pride over logic. Thankfully, our sons are nothing like you in that aspect. Tuzia's glare softened. Don't bother contacting us again until you've earned Vashakati's forgiveness. Before Salazar could answer, his wife killed the connection, leaving him alone in his private booth. With a defeated sigh, he stood up, ready to face Commander Juliana and hear the first of his punishments. A small, tiny voice at the back of his mind told him that he had nothing to fear, but he knew better. Even if Vashakati showed any leniency, a distinguished member of House Winfield, the first and oldest house at the direct service of the Royal House Astor, would bring down upon him the heaviest hammer they could manage. Salazar Reed wondered how thunderous the strike would be. As it turned out, the strike had far, far outweighed what he thought was possible. Salazar finished his meal, his hunger satiated, but the food had no taste. After his meteoric downfall, food had lost all flavor. Even wine and liquor tasted like water. It was a most miserable experience. Just as he was about to stand up, he noticed a group of 7 nobles approach the man who had been the object of his obsession and the reason for his misfortune. A small part of him wanted to warn his fellow Marines and the other 2 nobles to stay away from that man. But a bigger part of him wanted to see Wyatt Staples humiliate himself, much like he had done when he met him. Rumors were one thing, but it was well known that he had barked on command whilst aboard the Exalted Virtue. For a commoner, he was remarkably submissive and subservient, and many nobles took advantage of it themselves to further remind the upstart of his true place, at the feet of those who stood above in regal brilliance. Earnestly he watched as the man lowered his head in submission. A smile twisted his lips, not quite satisfied, but it was a start. He was too far away to listen to the exchange of words. Both parties were careful to avoid drawing unnecessary attention to their altercation. Several moments passed. the upper hand squarely set with the larger group. Suddenly and swiftly, like a thief, Wyatt Staples snatched the advantage for himself, standing strong against the group that tried to impose their authority as nobles upon him. His smile was lost when the nobles took a step back in doubt, words were exchanged, and victory was secured by the black-haired man and his companion. The larger group retreated, shamed and defeated, but spared from public humiliation. He realized, with a touch of dark irony, that he wouldn't have shown such mercy upon them in Wyatt's place. He certainly would have done his best to bring the man low had he joined them when the temptation caressed his heart. His bruises were gone, his lashing strikes healed, but the memory remained, the shame, the humiliation, the pain. They remained embedded in his memory. Slowly, Salazar felt the sick, parasitic joy of seeing the man who had cost him everything be brought low by another turn into a seething rage. Such feelings were quick to die, replaced by a void of surrender that he was now more than familiar with. He watched in silence as the two men received their rations, sat down, and ate at a moderate speed. The now sergeant waited and waited, not knowing what to expect or why he remained there, watching in silence as the damnable pilot who killed his brother ate without any remorse or care. He was about to stand up and march straight at him, consequences be damned, but the memory of his cold, focused, unfeeling brown eyes that pierced his very soul came to the forefront of his mind. His eyes were different now. Vibrant blue like a glacier's adorned his right, while his left was of a deep, vibrant hazel that was, impossibly, even colder than his blue one. But the feeling was the same. His bubbling rage died as abruptly as it had emerged. Defeated and without the need for retribution and revenge clouding his mind, the truth reared its ugly head. As much as he loathed it, he knew the truth. Nothing could change it. There was nothing to be done. The sound of footsteps coming to a halt next to him caught his attention. Looking up, he saw Wyatt Staples and his companion staring at him. It was only then that he realized the red-haired man was Ensign Galt Tirome, the man in charge of re-educating the lowly pirates the Reaper had adopted for some unknown reason. "May I help you, Ensign Galt?" Salazar found his voice. It was lacking the fervor and might he once had as a Marine captain. "Were you at all involved?" Galt asked in a serious tone. "I saw you looking rather expectantly, as if I could conjure any support to do something so petty," Salazar replied, pushing aside his empty, forgotten tray. "Their actions are their own. I have no leverage, influence, or standing to spare." His eyes shifted from the red-haired man to the heterochromatic man next to him. A shiver ran down his spine, but he glared at him all the same. "You know, if you wanted to gloat, you didn't need an excuse to come and see me, Lieutenant Staples." Wyatt crossed his arms. "Coming to talk to you was Galt's idea, not mine." Salazar scoffed. "Right," he said, turning to face them but remaining seated. "Go on. Gloat. You defeated me in combat. I received my punishment for my failure. You're within your right to push me down further against the mud. You got what you wanted, Staples." Maybe it was a bad idea, but Salazar didn't care anymore. Goading the pilot wouldn't make a difference now other than allowing him to save some face and whatever remained of his dignity. To his and Galt's surprise, Wyatt sighed and took the seat right in front of the brown-haired man. Stunned by his action, Salazar stared at Wyatt with incredulity. "Salazar, why would I need to gloat?" Wyatt began, eyes focused and serious. "You wanted to punish me for something that was not my fault. Your brother, Abacus, died by his own hand. 2 other pilots died because of him." He paused for a moment, pointing a finger at him. "You then continued to attack me, even during the trial. It was you who tricked me into accepting a duel to quell your thirst for revenge and honor. A duel I won. A duel born over what? An imaginary wrong that was created by your reckless brother?" The sergeant narrowed his eyes. "Nobles lead, commoners obey. Nobles lead, commoners follow. That is the imperative truth across the Principality. Under your command, my brother died, and thus a stain upon my house's honor was spilled. I tried to stop him. He refused to obey commands because was a commoner at the time. Given what I now know about your brother, I doubt he wouldn't have listened to me if I were a noble then," Wyatt pressed on. "He was far too ambitious and cruel in his methods." He was still my brother, Salazar replied. For all his faults and shortcomings, he was my beloved brother, and now he's dead, all because of you. Salazar, Galt tried to interject, but Wyatt reached to him, placing his hand on his forearm for a moment. With a nod, he closed his mouth and crossed his arms. Look, I understand you. If any of my brothers were murdered in cold blood, I would hunt the one responsible even if it killed me. I can understand your feelings, Salazar. But you can't blame anyone but your brother for his own death. He wasn't murdered, he wasn't killed in the line of duty. He died because he was stupid. Simple as that. The quicker you can accept that, then maybe you can heal and start over. Start over? Salazar scoffed with humorless air. Gods! Abacus was always so damn thick-headed. He failed to become a Marine, did you know that? Salazar asked rhetorically. Reckless, hot-headed, eager to earn glory, ambitious, stupid, and so infuriatingly conceited. I wanted the best for him, but he was so... I protected him too much, this I know. But I loved my brother. He and I share the same parents, my other siblings I care not for, but now he's gone. Salazar closed his eyes to prevent the warm, thick tears that had formed to fall freely. Gone because I failed him. It hurt. By the prince, admitting the truth hurt so bad. But despite the pain, Salazar refused to cry. He would do so later in private and save his dignity. I failed my brother, I failed my sons, I failed my wife, I failed my house. The sergeant opened his eyes, expecting to find a mocking gesture, a gloating smile, or anything but a distant but sympathetic glint reflected in the blue and hazel eyes of the man he had blamed so vehemently. It doesn't matter now. My life is ruined, my reputation is dead, my standing was destroyed, my dignity was shattered, my honor lies buried. I lost my standing within my house and family. My uncle revoked my titles, leaving me as a mere knight. But every noble is entitled to it by birthright. Salazar took in a deep breath. My contacts and allies abandoned me, turned on me even. Vultures, all of them. Commander Juliana demoted me so feverishly that the pain of the lashes was nothing compared to that fall. I'm forever stained as a failure, and now I am trying to impart even a measure of order into damn pirates. At this point, being exiled from my house would have been a mercy in comparison. Then start over, Wyatt repeated. You haven't deserted or killed yourself, so that means you're still loyal and want to live. But how? It can't be that simple, Salazar asked dryly. Wyatt stood up. I never said it would be simple, but if you don't want to give up, then find a reason to carry on. If it works for commoners, then it should be easier for nobles. It's at least worth a shot, right? Wyatt chuckled. For what it's worth, I don't hold a grudge against you for what you've done against me. Just like that? Salazar asked with incredulity as he rose to his feet. You're willing to forgive and forget so easily? He truly couldn't understand it. Few were the nobles who would allow petty slights and underhanded rumors to go unpushed. What he'd done was orders of magnitude greater. He had lost. Wyatt had every right to mock, ridicule, and expose him to his peers and bask in the glory of his well-earned victory. But here he was, telling him that such grievances were beneath him. Wyatt shrugged. I never sought to hurt you, Salazar. You did that yourself. You received your punishment. I don't know if it was just or not, nor do I care if it was. It is not my place to say. If I were you, I'd look for alternatives. Find a path that works for you, Salazar. Showcase your loyalty and listen to those around you. That's what I would do in your place, Wyatt said, eyes widening slightly. Look for alternatives. Find a path that works for you. Find a path. Those around you. He mumbled for a few seconds, his eyes darting around for several seconds until, with a nod, he turned around. Galt, forgive me. I have an idea that I need to test out, Wyatt said before abruptly darting out in a hurry. Salazar turned to Galt, confused. Sir? At ease, Reed, Galt replied, equally confused with a bemused smirk adorning his lips.